On our third anniversary, I cooked a French dinner, but husband didn't come home. When I called, his mistress answered. Who are you? He's asleep. Call tomorrow. So I cleared out the house and left. He collapsed when he saw the signed divorce papers. My third wedding anniversary started with an empty seat beside me and ended with a woman's syrupy voice purring, Samuel's asleep. Call back tomorrow. That night, my entire world imploded, and I knew my marriage was a lie. I had a gut-wrenching feeling, a cold dread twisting in my stomach, that he was with her again, Alice, his secretary. Defeated, with my shoulders slumped and a hollow ache already settling in my chest, I dragged myself home. There, waiting for me, was the candlelight dinner I'd meticulously prepared, the expensive wine breathing on the counter, all set for the romantic night we were supposed to share. But the joy I'd envisioned? It was crushed. My heart didn't just break, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Alone, I poured glass after glass of that wine, letting the alcohol numb the raw pain, blurring the edges of my cruel reality until the late hours of the night. Then, fueled by a desperate, drunken courage, I dialed his number. But it wasn't Samuel who answered. Instead, a voice, dripping with saccharine sweetness, purred into my ear. Who is this? Samuel's asleep. Call back tomorrow. My blood ran cold. The recognition hit me like a physical blow. It was Alice, Samuel's secretary, the woman who haunted my every insecurity. The alcohol, which had been my temporary shield, suddenly intensified the shock, making the betrayal sting even sharper. There was no escape. That night, I lay in our bed, the bed we were supposed to share, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling. The darkness offered no comfort, just a stark canvas for my crumbling world, until the first rays of morning light painfully pierced through the blinds. The next morning, Samuel called. His voice, raspy and tired, held no hint of remorse. Grace, you called me last night. Don't overthink it, he said, as if my shattered heart was merely an overthought. It was just a last-minute friends gathering. I drank too much. I stayed at Alice's place, but I slept on the couch. Nothing happened. The audacity. The sheer, infuriating lies. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just hung up. We didn't speak for an entire week. He didn't come home. When I finally went back to the office, a vibrant bouquet of roses was waiting on my desk. Bright, beautiful, and utterly meaningless. I barely glanced at them before scoffing and tossing them straight into the bin. This was Samuel's routine. His manipulation playbook. When I was upset, he'd give me the silent treatment, a cruel waiting game until I inevitably caved, until I apologized for his transgressions. And when his tactic failed, when a week passed without me crawling back, the roses would arrive. A supposed peace offering, a signal that he was ready to forgive me. And for 3 years, like a fool, I'd fall for it every single time. A simple bouquet, and I'd forgive him, no matter how deeply he'd wounded me. For 3 long years, I had been his puppet, dancing to his tune, letting him chip away at my dignity. I used to wonder why I never fought back, why I never left. But now, clarity pierced through the fog. I was so drowning in my own feelings for him, so desperate for his affection, that I didn't even see how little I valued myself. But that was then. Now, I was just tired. Bone-achingly, soul-deeply tired. Those roses, once a symbol of reconciliation, now stirred absolutely nothing within me. That evening, as I was finally wrapping up work, Samuel appeared. Unexpectedly. He stood right there at the entrance of my office. In 3 years, he had never once picked me up. This was a first. I walked over, my heart surprisingly calm, and asked, "What's the matter?" My voice must have been colder than I intended, because he looked genuinely taken aback, a flicker of awkwardness crossing his face. Maybe he was used to me always lowering my head, always eager to please him. Not anymore. He awkwardly scratched his head, clearly trying to mask his discomfort. Last week, he began. It was our anniversary. We had planned a movie, then dinner. I'll make it up to you tonight. A cold, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Anniversary, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. You missed it. And now you want to make up for it? No need. I don't think it matters that much. Just then, my pre-booked ride pulled up. Oh, and my ride is here, I added, almost as an afterthought. Thanks for coming to pick me up. Without another word, I turned, got into the car, and left him standing there. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him, hands stuffed in his pockets, a solitary, almost forlorn figure. The very next day, a new surprise. The general manager's office, which had been dark and empty for 2 months since the previous GM left, was now brightly lit. Finally, someone from headquarters has taken over, I thought, a flicker of professional interest sparking within me. My curiosity piqued, I walked over to peek. And then, my blood ran cold. There, sitting at the GM's desk, was Samuel. He looked up, catching my eye, and offered a casual, "Good morning." My brows furrowed in disbelief. Samuel and I worked for the same company, but he was a big shot at headquarters, and I was just at a branch office. The thought of him becoming our general manager had never even crossed my mind. Then I noticed it, a smaller, new desk just outside his office. And a pang of understanding hit me. He'd brought Alice with him. How convenient. Not only was he here, presumably to keep an eye on me, but he'd brought his mistress along for the ride. I managed a tight "good morning" in return and hurried to my own desk. As I navigated the open-plan office, the hushed whispers of my colleagues confirmed my suspicions. It was all about Samuel. Did you see the new GM? It's Samuel, the star from HQ. The operations VP. He's so handsome. And I heard his secretary, that rumored lover, Alice, came with him too. He has it all, career and a beauty by his side. Envy-worthy. Then, one of them lowered her voice conspiratorially. I heard Samuel's married, and the rumors say it's to someone from our company. I think it's Grace, our branch's operations director. As soon as they saw me approaching, the group of women instantly fell silent. I just sat down, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest, and started working. It wasn't long before Alice, in her annoyingly graceful way, sauntered over. "Mrs. Brooks," she simpered, "Mr. Brooks asked you to come to his office." I simply nodded, my face a mask of neutrality, and followed her. As we entered, Samuel stood and deliberately closed the door behind us, the click echoing ominously. I just looked at him, my gaze unwavering. "Just tell me if you need something." Samuel hesitated, almost stammering. "It's nothing really. I just wanted you to know that I requested this transfer to the branch from headquarters. I didn't have a chance to inform you beforehand." He paused again, then added, "And Alice coming with me? That was the CEO's decision, not mine." I kept my expression perfectly calm, a blank slate. But something about his demeanor was off. He was deferential. A stark contrast to the arrogant man I'd known. "This was a decision from headquarters, Mr. Brooks," I said, my voice cool, almost dismissive. "There's no need to inform me ahead of time. If there's nothing else, I'll be going now." But before I could turn, his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. His grip was tight, frustrated, almost desperate. "I've explained everything patiently to you. What else do you want?" Oh, how different I was now. In the past, a lowly apology from him, even one delivered after such a brazen act, would have melted my heart. I'd have cried, convinced he was the best man alive, truly sorry. But now, my heart was a stone. Numb. I wasn't swayed by his cheap theatrics anymore. I didn't yell. I didn't struggle. I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. And then, as if all the air had suddenly been sucked out of him, he deflated. His grip loosened, his enthusiasm completely drained. He sighed deeply, looking at me with an utterly helpless expression. "I admit, I didn't tell you the whole truth that night," he confessed, his voice softer now. "I was drunk, yes, but I didn't stay at Alice's place because I wanted to. She had a sudden stomach ache, and I didn't feel right leaving her alone. I stayed to look after her. I only said nothing happened to avoid making you overthink things." He paused, then continued, "And my transfer here, to the branch? It's because I wanted to have more time with you. Grace, when did things become like this between us?" I remained silent, the air between us thick with an unbearable tension that seemed to stretch on forever. Then, as if remembering a script, Samuel pulled a small, delicate box from his drawer. "Here," he said, handing it to me. "You mentioned this was beautiful a while ago." I glanced inside. It was Cartier's latest diamond necklace. I was genuinely surprised. He'd always disliked me wearing flashy jewelry, claiming it wasn't about money, but about taste. Now he was breaking his own rule. But I had no intention of accepting it. Some things, like a diamond necklace, only hold appeal at a certain moment. Once that moment is gone, so is their magic. Just then, as if on cue, Alice glided in. Seeing the box in my hand, she feigned an apology. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a file waiting for Mr. Brooks to sign." I turned my face away, ignoring her as she placed the file on Samuel's desk. "Oh, is this the new Cartier necklace?" she cooed, her eyes wide. "I've been wanting one for so long." Her words sent a jolt through me. Without thinking, I snatched the box and thrust it into her hands. "If you like it, it's yours." But before Alice could even savor her triumph, Samuel's hand shot out, snatching the box back with a chilling coldness in his voice. "It's not for you." The joyful expression on Alice's face instantly crumbled into shock. I didn't wait around for their inevitable argument. I just offered a small, knowing smile, turned, and walked out. That evening, I finally moved into the small apartment I'd secretly bought months ago. It wasn't as sprawling or luxurious as Samuel's house, but it was mine. Every inch of it, from the scent of fresh paint to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, bore only my traces. It was my sanctuary. And, a bonus, it was much closer to the office. After 3 years of marriage, suddenly being single again felt strange, almost foreign. My mornings, once a meticulous dance of making Samuel breakfast, helping him choose his clothes and tie, were now my own. My evenings, no longer a rush to cook dinner for him, stretched out before me, empty and inviting. And the sleepless nights spent agonizing over Samuel and Alice's latest rumors? They simply ceased to exist. All those obligations gone. A profound sense of lightness, almost a weightlessness, washed over me. At first, I braced myself for Samuel's inevitable pursuit, for his persistent attempts to win me back. But I was overthinking it. He didn't bother. Not a single call, not a single message. When we occasionally crossed paths at the office, we'd exchange polite nods, nothing more. And honestly, I found it perfectly fine. We were finally staying out of each other's lives. A month flew by, a whirlwind of newfound freedom. I channeled all my energy into my work, and the results were staggering. My performance figures had actually doubled. It was a stark, undeniable realization. Men, or at least this man, had only been holding me back. I found a quiet pride in myself. Grace, hadn't caved. I hadn't begged for reconciliation. It turns out, I could be self-centered in the best possible way. I didn't have to be anyone's doormat. By the way, if you're still with me on this wild ride, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming, and trust me, they only get crazier. Then came the Monday morning weekly meeting. My usual spot was always the first seat, right next to the general manager. But as I walked in, there she was, Alice, perched casually in my chair. I paused, a surge of irritation flashing through me, before calmly taking the seat beside her. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Every single colleague glanced between us, acutely aware that Alice, a junior secretary, was completely out of line. She wasn't even supposed to attend these meetings, let alone occupy my designated spot. Her job was to set up the room, nothing more. Samuel, sitting at the head of the table, gave Alice a quick glance, but said nothing. His silence was a silent approval. Normally, after Samuel introduced the meeting topic, I would deliver the first report on our weekly progress. But this time, after he finished speaking, Alice, still in my seat, brazenly took over. She launched into a lengthy, utterly inappropriate report about Samuel's schedule and the number of contracts he had signed. The whole room was dumbfounded. When had these things become part of our departmental report? By the time it was finally my turn, I couldn't completely hide my displeasure. And I could see, even through Samuel's carefully controlled facade, that he wasn't pleased either. After the meeting, Samuel deliberately waited until everyone else had cleared out. Grace, stay behind. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice clipped as he closed the door with a definitive click. Before I could even register his words, he was across the room, pushing me roughly against the wall. Are you ever going to stop? He hissed, his face contorted in a mask of fury. I met his gaze, my own eyes cold as ice. What did Mr. Brooks mean by that? Samuel was seething, his chest heaving with barely contained rage. You know exactly what I meant. You moved out without a word, ignored me for over a month, and yet you're still not done. A cold, brittle laugh bubbled up from deep within me. I'd actually thought Samuel, lost in Alice's warmth, would have completely forgotten about me by now. How wrong I was. He wasn't done. He'd been counting the days, hadn't he? Waiting for me to crawl back, to beg for reconciliation. I stared at him, my gaze unwavering. Samuel, I said, my voice cutting through the thick silence. Let's divorce. He looked at me, disbelief etched across his face. What did you say? I said, I repeated, my voice strong. Let's divorce. I'm willing to let you be with Alice. That was it. Samuel snapped. His hands shot out, gripping my neck, his breath hot and furious against my ear as he growled, Is it because of those rumors that you're going to divorce me? Grace, are you out of your mind? I won't agree to this. His grip tightened, squeezing the air from my lungs. I coughed violently, clawing at his hands, struggling desperately for a breath. It was only when someone knocked on the door, intending to clean the office, that Samuel reluctantly released me. I gasped, sucking in huge gulps of air, my throat raw. Back at my desk, the memory of his rage still burned, leaving me profoundly shaken. From that day forward, Samuel became a shadow, insisting on driving me home every evening, loudly declaring to the entire office that I was his wife. At first, I resisted, turning him down, but he would physically push away the ride-share drivers I called, making a scene, leaving me utterly embarrassed and helpless. After a few days of this torment, I gave in. He begged me repeatedly to move back in, but I remained firm. That house, once filled with shared laughter and quiet moments, now only held the scars of our past. Those happy memories were tainted, lost forever. The day Samuel made his public announcement, Alice confronted him, escalating into a massive scene. She took a week off. As for Samuel, he began an elaborate campaign to win me back, treating me with an exaggerated, almost theatrical attentiveness. He'd pick me up, drop me off, every single day. He'd bring my favorite breakfast, arrange afternoon tea, deliver fresh fruit to my desk. On weekends, he'd even come to my apartment to cook for me, and I had to admit, his cooking was surprisingly good. But inside, my heart remained empty. It felt like an act, a performance designed to make me feel something again. The truth was, I felt nothing. I was numb. A week later, another Monday. We were all in the meeting room, waiting for Samuel. But he didn't show. Alice wasn't there either. A small flicker of confusion, then concern. I went back to my desk, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I called him. His voice, when he finally answered, was hoarse, tired. Mr. Brooks, you missed the meeting. Are you coming in later? I asked, my tone strictly professional. There was a long pause. Then, his voice, softer, almost defeated. Is work all you care about? Can you show some concern for me? Oh, are you feeling unwell? I replied, a hint of skepticism in my voice. Over the phone, he coughed, dramatically. My lungs aren't feeling right. I think it might be pneumonia. I just ordered medicine online. Could you come over after work? Keep me company. I hesitated. We'll see. If it gets worse, go to the hospital. Don't wait too long, I urged, still trying to maintain distance. After work, I honestly had no intention of going. But then he called again. His pneumonia had worsened, he claimed, asking me to take him to the hospital. Against my better judgment, I decided to go. We might not be a couple, but as a colleague, I felt a strange obligation. When I rang his doorbell, he opened it almost immediately, looking surprisingly well for someone supposedly gravely ill. Not a single sniffle. Inside, The dining table was set for a lavish dinner, complete with wine and, you guessed it, roses. He quickly pulled out a chair for me, a hopeful glint in his eyes. I told you I'd make up for our anniversary, Mrs. Brooks. Please, allow me the honor. He was even dressed in a suit and bow tie, looking incredibly sharp. For a fleeting second, a tiny spark of emotion flickered within me. If he'd done this 2 months ago, but it was too late. I sighed inwardly, but didn't outright refuse his gesture. We ate dinner in a tense silence, sipping wine. Samuel's mood was anything but calm. He looked deeply into my eyes, then suddenly, with rapid, almost desperate breaths, he pulled me into his arms, onto the sofa. I didn't understand why, but in that moment, my body reacted. The alcohol, perhaps, or maybe a ghost of the connection we once shared. But just as I was on the verge of losing control, my hand brushed against something strange, something soft and silky, tucked under the sofa cushion. It was a thong. And it wasn't mine. Instantly, the sudden heat between us was doused with an icy spray. Both of us froze. The alcohol's haze vanished in a flash. Samuel's face drained of color, and he began to nervously stammer, "Grace, no, it's not what you think. This thing is just..." "Save your explanation," I cut him off, my voice dangerously calm. "You can have your fun." Slowly, deliberately, I straightened my clothes. Then, I picked up the thong and, with a chilling precision, stuffed it into his collar. I took a taxi home that night, and as the city lights blurred outside the window, I finally, truly, gave up. His calls flooded in, but I simply turned off my phone, pulled the blanket over my head, and fell into an exhausted, dreamless sleep. From that moment on, I cut off all communication except for strictly work-related matters. If he tried to drag me into his car after work, I called the police. If he showed up at my door, I did the same. Samuel, finally, was scared into submission. He stopped pestering me. Even Alice returned to work. From then on, our relationship, Samuel's, Alice's, and mine, became strictly professional. I don't know if Samuel and Alice still kept in touch after hours, but around the office, they were definitely more restrained. Time passed. About a month later, a university classmate who'd been abroad for years, Henry, announced his return. Our class monitor quickly organized a reunion, and he invited me. Henry and I were close, often meeting for meals, so I knew I could trust him. I discreetly checked. Neither Samuel nor Alice would be there. Good. I decided to go. That evening, I dressed with care, a sleek black evening dress, subtle makeup. But because of a last-minute operational data issue at work, I arrived a little late. As I approached the private room, I could hear a raucous clamor from inside. The door was slightly ajar, so I pushed it open gently, intending to slip in quietly and find a corner. But the scene that greeted me froze me solid. Alice. She was wearing a form-fitting dress, its fabric clinging to every curve, her legs sheathed in fishnet stockings. And she was perched right on Samuel's lap. Her long arms were wrapped around his neck, their lips locked in a passionate, open-mouthed kiss. Below them, a group of classmates, fueled by alcohol, cheered and clapped, chanting loudly, "Kiss. Kiss." It was obvious they were both beyond drunk. Alice, eyes half closed in a sultry expression, puckered her lips, about to dive in for another kiss. My sudden presence, however, sucked all the air out of the room. Everyone froze. Our classmates, of course, knew the messy history between Samuel, Alice, and me. But they also knew I was Samuel's legally wedded wife. The moment I walked in, both Samuel and Alice snapped to attention, instantly sobered. Samuel tried to push Alice off his lap, but she, quick-witted even when plastered, pretended to be even more intoxicated, clinging to him tightly, her eyes full of defiant challenge as she stared at me. Henry, our class president, sensing the suffocating awkwardness, quickly rushed over. "Grace, you're finally here. You're so late, we thought you weren't coming." I managed a light, almost ethereal smile. "Well," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, "everyone who shouldn't be here is here. So, how could I not show up?" With that, I walked straight up to Samuel and Alice, pulled out my phone, and started recording. Why not? I drawled. This is a free show. I'd like to see it too. Samuel froze, his face twisting with irritation. He tried to swipe my phone away. Are you crazy? He snapped. Then, with a furious shove, he practically flung Alice off his lap. I put my phone away, pouting theatrically. Homage. What a buzzkill. The party died then, ending on an incredibly sour note. Our classmate from abroad, now an awkward side character in this drama, even apologized by downing 3 shots. When I got home, the feigned bravado crumbled. I turned off the lights, sank onto the couch, and just cried. My heart broke all over again, the tears a hot, cleansing release. And as I lay there, I began to unravel the tangled mess of these past few years, the painful entanglement between Samuel, Alice, and me. The raw, agonizing truth was this: Samuel and Alice were childhood sweethearts. Their first love. I, Grace, was just the late arrival, the interloper in their decades-long story. Samuel, the scion of a wealthy family, was a typical second-gen rich kid. My family, the Brooks, had built our fortune from scratch. When I graduated college, my father's company, Brooks Incorporated, was hit by a brutal financial crisis. They desperately needed a $100 million investment. Alice's family, being ordinary, couldn't help. By then, I had been secretly in love with Samuel for 4 years, even confessing my feelings only to be gently rejected. I'd mentioned my crush to my father. He remembered. So, when he was approached for funding for Samuel's company, my father, ever the businessman, suggested a marriage alliance. Samuel's father, predictably, agreed. In our parents' eyes, business interests trumped everything. The feelings and futures of their children were just bargaining chips. Right after graduation, Samuel and I were engaged. The night of our engagement, $100 million landed in Brooks Incorporated's account. A few months later, we were married. During those early years, Samuel never showed resentment. He never mentioned Alice. He was kind, a competent husband, and always ensured I was respected as Mrs. Brooks in public. But 2 years ago, everything changed. Alice, who had gone abroad for studies, suddenly returned early. And from that moment, Samuel and she rekindled something. It spiraled completely out of control. At first, I confronted him, demanded to know why he'd lied. His response was cold, cruel. He told me our marriage was merely a transaction. He'd never loved me. He tolerated me only to avoid upsetting the deal, to prevent any financial loss to our families. But Alice's return shattered what little restraint he had left. And Alice? She returned with a clear agenda. She applied to be his secretary, always by his side. It was a ticking time bomb. For a while, I considered simply holding onto the title of Mrs. Brooks. As long as I didn't back down, Alice would forever remain the secret mistress. I had endured 2 years of silent torment. But now, I was utterly exhausted. If they were so desperate for me to step aside, then I would let them have it. But one thing still baffled me. Why was Samuel still pretending? Why did he refuse to divorce me, even after I suggested it? Was he afraid a divorce would ruin our family's business interests? If that was the case, I needed answers. That evening, I went to his office. "Let's have dinner tonight," I said, taking a deep breath. "I've made a reservation at your favorite restaurant." Samuel, buried in his work, looked up, surprised. Then his expression shifted to excitement, and he snapped his laptop shut. "It's about time to leave anyway. Let's go. I'll drive." At the restaurant, I ordered his favorite dishes. His mood seemed to lighten as he happily cut into a steak. "So, have you finally calmed down?" he asked, a light, teasing note in his voice. I watched him quietly, then spoke, my voice calm but firm. "Why won't you divorce me? Is it because you're worried about the impact on both our family's interests?" Samuel, mid-cut, froze. His face instantly turned cold. "Are you asking me this because you called me out for dinner?" he shot back. "Yes," I replied, "this is important to me. If it's because of this, I suggest we involve both our parents." Before I could finish, he slammed his knife and fork onto the table, the metallic clatter echoing. "Stop guessing. It's not about that. And don't bring it up again." I was startled by his sudden, explosive outburst. Why was he so sensitive about this? As I sat there, unsure how to respond, his phone rang. He answered immediately. Yeah, I'm eating. What's wrong? Are you feeling worse? I'll come over right away. He hung up, grabbed his coat, and rushed out, not even sparing me a glance. A wave of bitter frustration washed over me. Samuel had never treated me like this in public, even with his domineering pride. It could only be Alice. I paid the bill and hailed a cab. To my surprise, Samuel didn't drive to Alice's house. Instead, he pulled into a high-end private hospital. My curiosity, now a raging inferno, forced me to follow. Was Samuel sick? He strode straight into the gynecology and obstetrics department, pushing open the door to an examination room. My heart plummeted. Asterisk, why here? Was Alice pregnant? Asterisk, I stealthily followed a doctor who had just entered the room ahead of him. Through the narrow gap, I saw Alice leaning against Samuel, and the doctor was handing him a medical report. I was about to strain to eavesdrop, but just then, the doctor stood up and calmly closed the door. I froze, my heart pounding, relieved they hadn't seen me. I seized the chance to slip away unnoticed. Standing outside the hospital, a wildfire of rage consumed me. Those two. How dare they? Behind my back, they'd gone as far as getting her pregnant, and he still wouldn't divorce me? What twisted game was he playing? From that day forward, Samuel and I were nothing more than colleagues. Strictly business. Meanwhile, Samuel and Alice's time off became suspiciously frequent, often coinciding. It made perfect sense, didn't it? Alice was pregnant. Of course, Samuel would be involved in every doctor's appointment and checkup. Many of our colleagues noticed their strange behavior, the already obvious tension between them becoming a public spectacle. I often overheard whispers and knowing glances among the staff, though they were always careful to speak behind my back. One morning, as the elevator doors whispered open, I found myself face to face with Alice. I hadn't seen her for days. She'd been taking time off, and this unexpected encounter jolted me. She stood there in a white dress, clinging to her slim frame, her pale skin almost translucent under the harsh fluorescent lights. She looked fragile, thinner than I remembered. I couldn't help but wonder, had she just become pregnant? No visible bump, but it might be too early to show. The moment she saw me, her body stiffened. She turned away abruptly, twisting her back, sneering with undeniable disdain. The fury that had been simmering within me for weeks, ever since my hospital discovery, boiled over. Without thinking, I shot her a mocking smile, my eyes locking onto hers. What's with the sneer? I asked, my voice dangerously sharp. Are you enjoying being the other woman? Pregnant by a married man? Does that make you proud? Alice's face contorted with disgust, her eyes flashing with irritation. Are you crazy? She snapped. When did I ever get pregnant by a married man? I couldn't contain the bitterness anymore. So, you can do it, but not admit it? I retorted, a cold laugh escaping my lips. Go on, tell me. I'll even help you out. I watched as pure fury ignited in her eyes. Without warning, Alice raised her arm to shove me. But I was faster. I grabbed her arm, and with a surge of adrenaline, flung her aside. Just then, fate intervened, or perhaps destiny. The elevator doors opened. Alice stumbled backward, losing her footing, and crashed into the hallway. My heart lurched. Before I could even react, before I could rush forward to catch her, Samuel appeared as if on cue. He moved with astonishing speed, grabbing Alice and pulling her into his arms. For a split second, I thought he might actually help her. But instead, he freed one hand and slapped me across the face with a resounding, brutal crack. The sting of the blow burned across my cheek, and my mind went numb with shock and a blazing, incandescent rage. Grace, you're out of your mind. Samuel roared, his voice thick with disbelief and anger. Alice is in a weak condition, and you still dare to push her? I stood there, hand pressed to my burning cheek, my blood boiling. The anger I'd suppressed for so long finally erupted. I pointed a trembling finger at Samuel and screamed, "Do you have no shame? You got your mistress pregnant and still have the nerve to defend her in front of me." Samuel's face froze. His expression twisted with confusion and disbelief. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice shaking with incredulity. "I got whose belly big? Are you talking about Alice? You're insane. This is all in your head." I opened my mouth to tell him about the hospital visit, about seeing Alice there, about her being so far along in her pregnancy. But before I could speak, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Employees trickling in to clock in, their murmurs growing louder. The sight of their boss and an executive screaming at each other in the middle of the office entrance was disruptive, uncomfortable, utterly out of place. I quickly bit my lip, feeling the weight of 100 curious eyes on us. Without another word, I sidestepped Samuel and Alice, my chest tight with a pain that went deeper than the slap, and made my way to my desk. Sitting down, I couldn't shake the suffocating feeling. My heart was heavy, the confusion a relentless gnawing ache. If they were so in love, if Alice truly was carrying his child, why couldn't they just let me go? Why did they need to rub it in my face? Was Samuel deliberately trying to humiliate me? Was this his cruel way of forcing me to watch as his child was born to his mistress? The questions swirled unanswered, and I sank deeper into a dark vortex of hurt and despair. The next morning, a clear, decisive thought cut through the fog. A decision that felt like a monumental weight lifting from my shoulders, yet also like stepping off a cliff into uncharted territory. I couldn't let Samuel, or his indifference, tether me any longer. I prepared the divorce agreement with deliberate, almost mechanical precision, my fingers moving expertly over the papers as I drafted the final terms. When it was done, I placed it squarely on Samuel's desk, an unspoken challenge, a neatly signed declaration of my freedom. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold, sterile air of his office, trying to steady my racing nerves. I had no illusions about the battle ahead. If he tried to find another excuse to avoid it, I would fight him tooth and nail. I was ready to fight for my freedom, to reclaim my life. But to my utter astonishment, Samuel didn't hesitate. He glanced at the papers briefly, signed without a word, and slid the pen back across the desk. The divorce was finalized the very next day. It was over. I could hardly believe how smoothly it had gone. But the relief was short-lived. As the full weight of what had just happened sank in, I realized how suffocating my life had become in that house, with those two people who had grown so utterly repulsive to me. The thought of wasting any more time on him, was unbearable. I was done. Completely. Months before, a competitor company had offered me a general manager position for one of their branches. The catch? It was in another city, far from everything I knew and, crucially, far from Samuel. At the time, I'd hesitated. Would he approve? Would he stand in my way? But now, after everything, I simply didn't care. Without a second thought, I emailed them, inquiring if the position was still open. I didn't expect much, it had been so long. To my surprise, they responded almost immediately. The next day, they flew to meet me. Their enthusiasm was unmistakable. The meeting was a whirlwind, and within hours, they made me an offer. Start immediately. Everything moved so fast. My head was spinning, but there was no time for hesitation. I had to get out. I knew I couldn't resign in person. Samuel would turn it into a grotesque scene. So, I sent him an email, then called him just to confirm. When he answered, there was a long, heavy pause, as if the mere sound of my voice had caught him off guard. Then, without an ounce of emotion, he simply muttered, "Okay." The indifference in his voice was suffocating. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a response. Instead, I focused on the thrilling future I was about to build for myself. In Shanghai, I quickly established the new branch. My career took off in ways I'd never imagined. The company that hired me was in the same industry as Samuel's, and the bitterness that had simmered within me for so long found a surprising, powerful outlet in the competition. I made things difficult for him. I targeted his resources, always striving to outdo him. Each success felt like a small, sweet revenge for the years I had sacrificed my own happiness. When I heard Samuel's business had dropped by nearly half in 6 months, a part of the deep-seated frustration I'd carried finally began to ease. It wasn't that I relished his failure, but it was a stark reminder that I was no longer bound by his presence, no longer dependent on his approval. 6 months passed without any personal contact. I had no idea what was happening with him or Alice. I simply assumed my life would never cross paths with theirs again. Alice was probably about to give birth by now, I thought, and my new life had nothing to do with them. Then, on the eve of the new year, everything changed. I had come back home to celebrate, looking forward to the peace and quiet of my own space. But when I opened my door, there he was, Samuel, standing on my doorstep. I froze, staring at him, a cold wave of disbelief washing over me. What was he doing here? I didn't move. I certainly didn't want him to step inside. "Mr. Brooks," I said, my voice cutting through the sudden, awkward silence. "Here to wish me a happy new year? There's no need. I'm not accepting guests." My words were as cold as the winter air that rushed in from outside. Samuel's face was worn, tired, like a man burdened by an invisible weight. He stared at me, searching for words, but there was nothing in his eyes except an overwhelming sense of loss, or perhaps regret. After a long, unbearable moment, I broke the silence again. "Oh, by the way," I added, unable to stop myself, a sharp edge in my voice. "I should congratulate you. You married Alice, didn't you? And became a father, right?" The words came out almost spitefully, coated in the bitterness I'd held onto for months. I watched as his face drained of color. His breathing grew ragged, as if my words had physically struck him. The tension in the air thickened, and a strange sense of satisfaction, a small taste of justice, flickered within me. I stared at him, feigning confusion. "What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" I asked, my voice tinged with mock concern. Samuel's eyes were filled with an oceanic depth of sorrow and regret, a sadness so profound it seemed to weigh down every word he spoke. "Grace." His voice cracked, as if the burden of what he was about to say was too heavy to carry alone. "That's not the case. Alice, she passed away 2 months ago. It was advanced cervical cancer." The words hit me like a physical punch to the gut. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to grasp the horrifying truth. The world around me seemed to blur, the sounds of the city fading into a distant hum as I tried to process the impossible. "What? What did you say?" "Alice is dead." My voice came out disbelieving, barely above a whisper. "When did she get cervical cancer?" Samuel's face was a mask of pure pain, his eyes downcast as though the very mention of her name caused him agony. He hesitated, as if revisiting a place too painful. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick with raw emotion. "Last year, on our 3rd anniversary," he began, his words carefully measured, "I never told you the truth. That night, I wasn't drunk, and it wasn't because she had a stomach ache and asked me to stay. The truth is, that night she found out she had late-stage cervical cancer." A strange, nauseating guilt began to rise in my chest, making my stomach churn. I wanted to say something, anything, but my mouth was dry. The words lodged somewhere deep within my throat. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I finally managed, my voice shaking slightly, betraying the tremor that now ran through my entire being. The weight of the question felt heavier than I expected, as if all the years of confusion and hurt were converging on this single, agonizing moment. Samuel let out a bitter, hollow laugh, a sound devoid of joy, echoing eerily in the silence between us. His eyes, so full of regret and sorrow, looked at me with a quiet, resigned finality, yet also with a profound fatigue, as though the burden of keeping this secret had worn him down to the point of utter exhaustion. "Alice didn't want me to tell you," he said, his tone barely above a whisper, the sadness almost palpable. "She said her last wish was for me to be by her side as her boyfriend. She didn't want my selfish actions to cause us to divorce, and she genuinely hoped we could stay out of each other's way quietly, without drawing attention." He paused. "But, you know, it's impossible to hide something like that for long." The air between us was thick, charged with the weight of so many unsaid words. Yet all I could feel was a confusing blend of disbelief and a strange, unexpected clarity. I swallowed hard, the knot in my throat tightening, before forcing out the next question, the one that had gnawed at me for months, the one that had stolen countless nights of sleep. I know you probably thought that before I divorced you, I said, the words tasting bitter, that Alice was carrying my child and that I was following her to the maternity ward. But the truth is, I was with her for her cervical cancer checkups, not for a pregnancy test. The full, crushing truth of his words hit me like a massive wave, and I struggled to stay upright, the sheer weight of it threatening to buckle my knees. I saw a subtle shift in Samuel's expression, a flicker of pain and sympathy crossing his face as he leaned forward slightly, bracing himself for the next part of this excruciating conversation. You can't blame her for always being hostile towards you, he said, his voice soft, tinged with a deep, lingering sadness. After all, she loved me for so many years. There was a distant, almost wistful look in his eyes, as if he were remembering a time long past, a memory now so far removed from the brutal reality of our present. But now, everything is in the past. I don't want to dwell on it anymore. I just hope you can let go of your feelings and move on. His words hung in the air, heavy with a heartbreaking finality. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, but there was something else too, a quiet plea, as if he was asking for forgiveness for things already said and done, for wounds already inflicted. I wanted to tell him how much I still hurt, that moving on wasn't that easy. But the word stuck, caught between the past and the present, between everything I thought I knew and the shattering truth he had just laid bare. His voice hung in the air like a dense, suffocating fog, leaving me utterly uncertain of what to make of it all. I stared at him, my gaze searching his eyes. Those once warm eyes, once filled with affection, were now clouded with remorse and something deeper, something that almost looked like apology. It was strange, unsettling, but for a fleeting moment, a flicker of something stirred in my chest. Not forgiveness, no, but something akin to understanding. It was there and gone in an instant, a brief flash of emotion that I quickly pushed aside. So I asked, my voice quieter now, almost hesitant, a hint of the vulnerability I had long buried escaping. You specifically came to see me today to clear up this misunderstanding? The question lingered, an unanswered prayer hanging between us. Samuel's lips curled into what could only be described as a reluctant smile, strained and tired, as if the effort to express anything positive was too much. It's not just about that, his words faltered, and for a moment, his eyes dropped, avoiding mine, before he met my gaze again. There was something raw in his expression now, something unguarded. I also wanted to ask if we could remarry. My parents have been scolding me for a year now, he added, his voice laced with frustration, tinged with an exhaustion I hadn't heard in so long. It caught me completely off guard. A stab of unprepared emotion. His request hung between us like a heavy stone, pressing down on my chest. A cold shiver raced down my spine as memories of the divorce, the devastation, the lies, the deceit that had shattered everything we once were, resurfaced. The sharp ache of that final goodbye had never truly faded. And now he was asking for a second chance at something that felt beyond repair. I couldn't stop myself. The question slipped out before I could rein it in. Didn't you say that Alice didn't want you to divorce me because of her selfishness? Why did you agree to the divorce later? The words were out, and the moment they left my lips, the room seemed to contract around us, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. Samuel froze, his eyes locking onto mine. For a heartbeat, he didn't speak, as if the weight of my question had rendered him momentarily speechless. His face was unreadable for a beat, the silence stretching between us like an eternity. Before he finally opened his mouth, his voice was low, barely a whisper, as though confessing something far too painful to say aloud. To be honest, don't blame me for this. But at that time, I really did think about burning all bridges. I thought maybe I could gather the courage to end things with you once and for all. After all, as you know, our marriage was just a transaction. I wanted to make it up to Alice before she passed. I wanted to give her the wedding of her dreams. His words hung in the air, heavy with raw regret. He sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his own admission had crushed him. His vulnerability, now completely exposed in a way I hadn't seen before. That was my decision, and it had nothing to do with Alice. As his words sank in, something within me shifted. Strange, unexpected sense of relief washed over me, as though the colossal weight I had been carrying had lightened, even if only by a fraction. It was almost like the final piece of a complex puzzle falling perfectly into place. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest easing just a little. I spoke, my voice steady, but with a quiet, undeniable finality. Well then, I wish you well. You fulfilled the last wish of the woman you loved. Samuel's gaze held mine for a moment longer, but there was something in his eyes that unsettled me. A lingering emotion I couldn't quite place. A flicker of uncertainty. Or perhaps, regret. It unsettled me, leaving me wondering if he had truly come to terms with everything that had happened between us. Then, after another long silence, he spoke again, his voice heavy with something I still couldn't quite grasp. But the reason I came today, he began, his words slow and deliberate, is that I want to remarry you. I froze. The words hit me like a slap. I couldn't move. I stared at him, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what he had just said. Confusion, disbelief, an overwhelming flood of emotions bubbled up inside me. Samuel, I stammered, the words escaping before I could stop them. You really caught me off guard. You said you needed to gather the courage to leave me. We're already divorced. Why would you want to remarry? I know you don't love me. A profound shift occurred in his expression. His eyes, which had been steady just moments ago, suddenly turned bloodshot, the color deepening as if something deep inside him had irrevocably cracked. Because after Alice died, I realized I had fallen in love with you. His voice was raw, tinged with a startling vulnerability I had never expected from him. I blinked, feeling the air around us thicken with his confession, but the shock hadn't quite settled yet. Then, he continued, would you be willing to accept me again and try to start over? His voice softened, almost pleading, as he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Without hesitation, he dropped to one knee in front of me, holding out a sparkling diamond ring. The overhead light caught the facets, making it gleam like some cruel, twisted illusion. For a moment, my breath caught. His sincerity, the desperate look in his eyes, almost convinced me. I could feel my resolve wavering, like a fragile thread stretched to its breaking point. But then, in the suffocating silence that followed, reality began to seep in, and the confusion finally began to clear. I stood there, gathering my thoughts, my heartbeat steadying with a calm I didn't know I possessed. I met his eyes and slowly, deliberately, shook my head. I'm sorry. I can't accept, I said, my voice clear, though it quivered slightly at the edges. Samuel looked up, his face etched with disbelief, surprise evident in every line. Why don't you love me anymore? A bitter smile tugged at my lips, and I let out a small, almost empty laugh. Samuel, from the moment you reluctantly agreed to marry me, through our entire marriage, you've been acting. You played the role so well that I almost believed it myself. But you can't fool your eyes. There's never been any love for me in them. Haven't you noticed? I paused, watching his face shift with each word. Every time we looked at each other, your gaze was unfocused, like you were somewhere else entirely. But I've seen the way you look at Alice. It's different. It's intense, passionate, deep, as if you wanted to see straight into her soul. And that's the truth of it, Samuel. His breath hitched. For a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a dawning realization, perhaps, but I wasn't done. I had to say it all. And you and Alice, don't try to deny it. You didn't just start your relationship a year ago when she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. You've been involved since you were teenagers. And when she came back 2 years ago, that's when everything reignited. Your feelings for her didn't begin when she was sick. They never truly went away. I took a small step back, my heart steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. And what you call suddenly realizing you love me is nothing more than habit. You've gotten used to having me around these past few years. Now that Alice is gone, you're just feeling empty without me, right? You miss the familiarity. But it's not love. Samuel's face had gone utterly pale, his confusion morphing into something darker. His expression shifted rapidly, his mind clearly racing to process every cutting word. So, you think I never really loved you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if the weight of his own words was too much to bear. I let out another bitter laugh, a small chuckle completely devoid of joy. Yes, Samuel. You never loved me from the start, and you never will. What you feel now is just the lingering memory of habit combined with the relentless pressure from your parents, who have never truly let you breathe. But I don't want to go into it any further. Take care of yourself, and please, don't come looking for me again. My voice was calm, but my heart was heavy, each word a slow, painful release. With that, I turned and, without looking back, I closed the door softly behind me. Not all love can be rekindled. Some things are better left in the past, where they belong. After the new year, I boarded a flight to Ocean City, a thrilling mix of excitement and anticipation filling me as the plane ascended. The hum of the engine became a steady backdrop to the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. My career was about to embark on a fresh start, and with it, I was ready to leave behind the crushing weight of the past. Life, after all, isn't just about love. There are so many other things worth pursuing, so many other dreams to chase. The air in Ocean City felt different, crisp, invigorating, brimming with the promise of new beginnings. A year flew by, a blur of intense work and remarkable personal growth. Then, the unexpected news reached me. Samuel, of all people, had entered a monastery. The news hit me like a sharp, surprising breath, yet it felt strangely distant, disconnected. His branch office, once a bustling hive of activity, was now without a leader, the company in disarray. A part of me wondered what could have driven him to such a drastic change. But I quickly pushed the thought aside. His choices no longer affected my life, not in the profound way they once did. I reported this development to my company's headquarters, and within days, they decided to acquire Samuel's company. A quiet satisfaction settled in my chest as I watched the wheels of corporate strategy turn, knowing I had played a pivotal part in this monumental shift. The acquisition was swift, and soon, the leadership of Samuel's once thriving office was handed over to someone new, someone from my company. Thanks to my outstanding performance and the rapid growth I'd cultivated, I was promoted. The offer to transfer to the group headquarters came as a surprise, but it was a welcome one. My promotion to vice president was a clear acknowledgement of my relentless hard work and dedication. It was a moment of triumph, not just for the title or the prestige, but because it marked the definitive beginning of a brand new chapter. As I settled into my new role at the group headquarters, the transition was both exhilarating and, at times, overwhelming. My office, perched on the 25th floor of a sleek glass building, offered a stunning panoramic view of the city skyline. I'd often pause at the window, gazing out at the bustling streets below, lost in thought. The vibrant pulse of the city was both a reminder of the powerful world I was now a part of and a quiet reassurance that I had, indeed, taken the right path. Days blurred into weeks. The work was demanding, yes, but there was a deep sense of fulfillment in every project I oversaw. The headquarters was a hive of intense activity, the air thick with the energy of people pushing to meet deadlines, brainstorming groundbreaking ideas, negotiating crucial deals. My team was exceptionally talented, and for the first time, I felt truly valued for my abilities, for me. One late afternoon, as I was sifting through a stack of reports, my phone buzzed on my desk. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was a message from Samuel. "Grace, can we talk?" My fingers hovered over the phone, my heart racing, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I hadn't heard from him in months, and reaching out now after everything was the last thing I expected. A suffocating mix of frustration and morbid curiosity flooded over me. Asterisk, why now? Why, after all this time, asterisk, just when everything in my life was finally, beautifully, falling into place. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, torn between wanting to hear him out, needing an explanation, and the painful memories that resurfaced every time I so much as thought of his name. Finally, I exhaled deeply, placed my phone back down, and forced myself to focus on the tasks at hand. But the thoughts lingered, an unwelcome shadow stubbornly clinging to the edges of my mind. I had worked so incredibly hard to put him and the past behind me, to carve out a future that didn't revolve around his mistakes, his lies, his betrayals. The idea of him somehow showing up again felt like a catastrophic disruption to the delicate balance I had so carefully built. The next morning, my assistant knocked on my door, her expression a little too serious. "Grace," she said, "there's a Mr. Brooks here to see you. He says it's urgent." A chill swept over me, my gut clenching. Samuel. He was standing right outside my office door. I hadn't seen him in person for months. The familiar, almost magnetic pull I had once felt toward him was utterly gone. What remained was a faint echo, a ghost of what had been. He looked different, tired, older perhaps, with shadows under his eyes and a few more lines etched onto his face, as though time had finally caught up to him. "Grace," he said softly as I stepped into the doorway, his voice carrying a note of raw vulnerability I hadn't heard before. "I know you probably don't want to see me, and I wouldn't blame you. But I need to apologize. For everything." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, all I could hear was the frantic rush of blood in my ears. I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the conflicting emotions that churned inside me: anger, resentment, and a strange, aching sadness, all battling for dominance. "Samuel," I finally said, my voice steady, but cold, unforgiving. "You have no idea what you put me through. No apology will undo that. You had your chance." He took a step closer, as if my words hadn't quite reached him, his eyes searching mine, desperate for some sign, some hint that reconciliation was still possible. "I know I hurt you," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "But I've changed. Grace, I'm not the same person anymore. What happened with Alice, it was a mistake. I was confused, and I lost sight of what really mattered." I took a deep, fortifying breath, my heart racing in my chest. He was still the same. Still trying to make me believe that his words could magically fix everything. But the truth was, I wasn't the same person I had been when I was with him. I was stronger now, fiercely independent, and most importantly, I had learned to rely on myself, not him. "I'm glad you found clarity, Samuel," I said quietly, meeting his gaze head-on. "But my life has moved on. I've moved on." I could see the fresh hurt bloom in his eyes, but there was no turning back now. The woman who had once clung to him in desperation, waiting for him to finally choose her, was long gone. In her place was someone who understood that life, with all its unexpected twists and turns, could be beautiful, even without him. With one last, lingering look, Samuel turned and walked away, disappearing into the elevator. I stood there, my heart heavy with a profound mix of relief and a strange, quiet regret. The rest of the day passed in a blur, my thoughts drifting back to that final, poignant moment. But as the hours wore on, I felt the last vestiges of that heavy weight lift. I had finally, truly made peace with my past. Samuel's appearance had only confirmed what I already knew. He was a closed chapter, a story I had finished writing long ago. And no matter how hard he tried to reopen it, the final word had already been penned. As I sat at my desk later that evening, gazing out at the city lights twinkling below, I realized it with absolute certainty. The future was finally, truly mine. And for the first time in a very long time, I was completely content with the direction it was taking. Thank you for watching today's story. If you've ever felt like you lost yourself in a relationship, or had to walk away from someone you once loved to find your own strength, I want to hear from you. What helped you reclaim your power? Let me know in the comments below.